Hi, I'm Arden Waverly. For years, I thought if I just worked harder, loved deeper, maybe one day they'd see me. Not just see me in the room, but really see who I was, beneath the steadiness, the silence, the sacrifices. Instead, they erased me. Not with shouting, but with omission. At their 40th anniversary party, I wasn't just uninvited. I was quietly replaced by my sister's boyfriend. They took me out of the night, out of the guest list, out of the family slideshow, out of the story. But the one thing they couldn't erase was the truth. Have you ever been written out of your own family's version of events? If so, you're not alone. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you tuning in from and what time is it for you? I read every comment. The rain hadn't stopped all morning in Asheville. The kind that didn't pour, just whispered outside my window. The trees in Pack Square shimmered under the mist, their leaves slick and trembling. I sat at the dining table, the smell of bergamot from my tea steeping slowly beside me. In front of me, a crisp ivory envelope, the card I had designed myself weeks ago. Custom foil pressed edges, a soft gold monogram of their initials. Something elegant, something meaningful. Beside it was the gift I had chosen long before the invitation ever came or didn't come. A hand-painted wall clock, antique style with Waverly, 1984, etched delicately at the base. I had found the artisan at a weekend market in Black Mountain, told her I wanted something that would feel like a legacy. Maybe this year, I thought maybe they'd finally remember all I'd done, the debts I'd helped settle, the holidays I carried, the silence I held. Maybe this year would be different. I picked up the phone and stared at the screen. My mother's name glowed faintly. I hesitated, not because I was afraid, just tired. But I pressed call anyway. The line rang twice. Arden? She answered, her voice brisk as if she hadn't been surprised. Hey, Mom, I was thinking maybe I could come a little early this weekend, help with setup for the anniversary. Silence, not the warm kind. Then, the distant clink of dishes. Oh, honey, she started. And I felt it before I heard it. That strained note in her voice, the one she used when she didn't want to say no, but would anyway. Before I could respond, my father's voice cut through in the background. Firm, almost rehearsed. It's better if you don't come this year. A pause. A chair scraped on tile. It's complicated. I blinked. Complicated how? Another pause. This one is heavier. Then Mom's voice again, quicker this time. Melissa's bringing someone important, a colleague. It's just, things are already so full. We don't want too much going on. Someone important. Not me, never me. The cold from the window seeped through the glass as I leaned my forehead against it. Right, I said, keeping my voice calm. Another silence. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, hoping maybe they'd call back, hoping maybe this was just a misstep, a mistake, a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was a decision, a quiet, coordinated exclusion. I placed the phone down slowly beside the card and the clock. The card still read in perfect script. To the two people who taught me what loyalty should look like. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, listening. The clock in my kitchen ticked on. Each second, louder than the last I sat at the kitchen table of my quiet little house in Asheville. The same one I'd poured 10 years of savings into restoring. And yet, somehow right now, it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a museum to someone else's life. The gift sat exactly where I had left it, still wrapped, still perfect. A hand-painted clock etched with the Waverly name, the one I had commissioned from a local artisan up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. The card tucked gently beneath its ribbon was still sealed, a note of love and effort they'd never read. My vision blurred, but I blinked it away. I wasn't going to cry over people who had already made peace with my absence, over people who, if I were being honest with myself, had never truly made room for me at the table to begin with. The house felt too big all of a sudden. Every corner's too quiet, too honest. I thought of the birthday when my name had been spelled wrong on the cake, how they'd laughed, said it didn't matter. It's just cake. Artie, my sister had giggled, and the rest of them had chuckled. Like, I should have been grateful they remembered it all. I remembered flipping through the old family photo albums during one long winter, and how often I found myself fading into the corners of the frame, half visible, half acknowledged, like a prop that wandered too close to center. And yet, year after year, I had shown up. I'd brought gifts, flown home for holidays even when money was tight, offered to help with bills when the roof needed patching or mom's car needed tires. Every sacrifice, every quiet offer, all rooted in the same aching hope. Maybe this year they'll see me, but they hadn't. And now looking out into the misty morning, where the rain had softened everything into watercolor sadness, the truth felt like something that had been sitting in the walls all along, just waiting for me to get quiet enough to hear it. They had never wanted me there. The truth of it dropped like an anchor in my chest. I reached out, ran my fingers along the edge of the ribbon, the soft velvet bow now stiff from the overnight chill. It was the texture of a different kind of grief, one you wrap yourself in like an old cardigan when there's nothing left to argue. The rain picked up again, drumming a dull rhythm against the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. A neighbor's dog barked. And inside this house, there was nothing but the hollow weight of acceptance, settling into the corners. Maybe it had always been here. Maybe I just hadn't been ready to call it by name. I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under me. The gift stayed where it was silent, still waiting. Like me? And suddenly, I wasn't sure what hurt more, the rejection itself, or the quiet realization that some part of me had expected it. That maybe I had always known they wouldn't open the door if I knocked too loudly. By the time morning truly arrived, the sky had shifted to a heavy gray. Thick as wet wool, I sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair, in the same silence. My coffee mug sat untouched beside me, cold, forgotten. Outside, the early birds flitted from tree to tree. Inside, it felt like all the sound had been drained from the room, like even the walls were holding their breath. Out of habit, I reached for my phone. The screen lit up instantly. No missed calls, no messages, just the endless scroll of other people's lives happening without me. I swiped lazily, more muscle memory than interest. And then I saw the photo. A wide white canopy strung with fairy lights, a long table filled with catered food, my mother's favorite stargazer lilies blooming in glass vases behind them. I knew that setup. I had planned half of it with her last year. Same florist, same bakery, same everything. It was the anniversary party, the one they'd told me not to come to. Another swipe. There she was, Melissa, my younger sister, in a champagne-colored dress holding up a familiar-looking clock, my clock. The caption sliced straight through me. So proud of Melissa for organizing such a beautiful night. Couldn't ask for a more thoughtful daughter. No mention of me. No credit. Not for the gift. Not for the work. Not for the years. It wasn't just absence. It was erasure. I stared at the screen, willing it to be a mistake, willing it to flicker, glitch, show some sign of remorse. But the photos kept coming. More smiles, more captions. She always knows how to make things special. She's the heart of our family. A fresh notification pulled my gaze back the comment section. She didn't even bother to show up, so selfish. Some people can't stand when others shine. Always thought she was a little odd. Every word felt like a slap. The narrative was already being rewritten, and this time I wasn't even a footnote. I pushed away from the table. The chair screeched across the tile like a scream I didn't let myself make. My heart pounded not with panic, but with something colder, something firmer. I walked to the sink, turned the water on cold, and let it run over my hands until they went numb. 3 days ago, I believed I mattered. I believed I belonged. Now, they hadn't just shut the door. They were painting over it, erasing the frame, pretending I was never there. The rest of the day passed, like I was underwater. Every sound muffled, every movement slow. I drifted from room to room aimless. My body moved, but my mind stayed curled up at that kitchen table next to a gift that no one would ever know was mine. The house, my quiet cottage on the east edge of Asheville, felt cavernous. Too many corners. too much quiet. Every creak in the floorboards echoed like footsteps I hadn't invited. By late afternoon, the sky shifted from gray to something softer, something almost blue, but it didn't matter. Inside, everything remained the same, dim, still, distant. I found myself sitting back at the table, phone still in hand. The screen had gone black, but I didn't turn it back on. Instead, I traced the edge of the wood grain with my fingers, following its worn, familiar lines. I thought about the party, the one still spinning on the other side of town, full of laughter and shallow toasts and polished family lies. I pictured Melissa still beaming for photos. My parents stood proudly behind her, like she was the only name that mattered on the family tree. And my gift, my clock held in hands that didn't even care to understand it. I wondered if they had read the card, the one where I had written, "Thank you for loving us all these years." The one where I had called them my home. Had they even noticed it was missing? Or had they thrown it away without opening it? Assuming it was from someone else, someone worth remembering, the betrayal settled deeper than any wound I could point to. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like a slow leak, like poison laced in politeness. A smile for the camera, a toast to a lie, and an unspoken agreement that I no longer belonged. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't call anyone to make sense of it for me. I simply sat there, letting it steep, letting the truth soak into my skin like the chill of a late November wind. I had lost them long ago. Long before this party, long before Melissa's boyfriend became more important than their daughter. I had just been too hopeful to admit it. They had already rewritten the story, I just hadn't seen the edits until now. I flipped my phone face down. The black glass reflected nothing back to me, just a blank screen like the role they had written me out of. For one breathless moment, I wanted to drive there, march through the doors, rip the truth out of their hands, make them see me. I imagined it so clearly, the gasps, the stuttered apologies, the air sliced open by my presence. I could have done it. I could have taken back the space they stole. But I didn't move because something colder had settled inside me. I didn't want to be seen at their table anymore. I wanted to build a table of my own, one where truth didn't have to scream to be heard. So I let them keep their stories, let them believe they had won. Sometimes silence is louder than any confrontation. The sun dipped lower outside, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I stood, my body stiff from stillness, and wandered toward the living room window. The glow of porch lights blinked on one by one along the quiet streets of North Asheville. And somewhere across town, they were still clinking glasses to a fantasy. But the truth, it has teeth. It slips through cracks when no one's looking. And I wasn't done yet. At the party, Callista posed for another round of photos near the dessert table, her smile polished to perfection. The rented banquet hall shimmered under strings of fairy lights, the air buzzing with congratulatory chatter and shallow pleasantries. It was the kind of evening that looked flawless until you looked just a little closer. By the bar, my older cousin Marlene sipped her wine and narrowed her eyes. She turned toward my mother and asked just loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "Where's Celine? Isn't she the one who works at Pacific TerraTech?" A strange stillness rippled through the group, the kind that makes your skin tighten. Glances were exchanged, smiles stiffened. Callista let out a casual laugh, flipping a strand of hair over her shoulder with rehearsed ease. "Oh, she's off doing her own thing," she said lightly. "Very independent, you know." There it was, dismissive practice so thin you could see right through it. Marlene didn't press further, but the question had already punctured the evening's illusion. Conversation stalled for a few beats before finding its hollow rhythm again, but the crack had formed. Later that night, after most of the guests had filtered out in waves of polite goodbyes and air kisses, Callista pulled her boyfriend Dorian toward a smaller circle of family near the back. "So, this is Dorian," she said, her voice too bright. "We've been seeing each other for a few months now." Dorian, tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who didn't need to impress because he was already sincere, offered a warm smile and shook a few hands. He didn't have the sleekness the rest of them wore like armor. He seemed real. Unaware of the undercurrents tightening around him, he took a glass of champagne from my father and chuckled as he raised it in a casual toast. Crazy small world, huh? I just started working at Pacific Terratech. He smiled wider, oblivious to the weight his next words carried. My boss is amazing, tough but fair. He paused, looking around warmly. To Celine Caro, he said, lifting his glass higher. The room froze. You could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan. A fork clattered onto a plate. A single gasp broke the stillness. Dorian lowered his glass a little confused. His smile faltered. Around him, the warmth drained from the room like air from a punctured tire. Callista's hand tightened around his arm, her nails biting into the fabric of his sleeve. My mother's smile strained at the corners. My father cleared his throat, but no words came out. They had spent the entire evening spinning a world where I didn't exist, where I was a shadow. They could sweep behind the curtain and forget. But reality had just shattered the illusion, loud, direct, undeniable. They could erase my face from their family portraits. They could twist conversations until my name no longer fit. But they couldn't erase my work, my identity, my name. And now it was echoing through the very hall they'd used to celebrate a version of the family that didn't include me. Dorian stood there, still trying to understand the silence he'd just stepped into. I could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes, piecing together. The awkward glances, the subtle tension, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not the hopeful, aching smile I used to wear. This one was sharper, colder, final. Because now I knew they couldn't control the narrative anymore. They could crop me from photos, but they couldn't delete the truth. The silence became a weight in the room. Guests froze. Silverware stilled. Champagne flutes remained untouched. Callista laughed, thin, desperate. Oh, Celine's just middle management, she said quickly. She keeps to herself, always busy. It was a lie, and a bad one. Flimsy and see-through. But it was the only story she had left. Dorian blinked to middle management, he repeated, glancing down at her. She's one of the co-founders. The company was her idea. Everyone knows Celine's the backbone of Pacific Terratech. You could have heard a pin drop. No one reached for another canapé. No one moved. And just when I thought the air couldn't get heavier, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an alert. A flag notice from my student loan portal. I hadn't checked it in months. My tuition had been long paid off. I opened it instinctively, then froze. A new loan had been activated. Under my name, co-signed, but not by me. The co-signer, my mother. The date, right around the time Callista returned to school for her second graduate program. Something she bragged about constantly, but never paid for. My stomach twisted. My blood turned to ice. All this time, while they erased me from photos, they used my name, my credit to fund her dreams without my consent, without a single word. That night in the same hall where they toasted her and buried me, I learned the last piece of the truth. They hadn't just rejected me. They had stolen from me, and finally, I was done pretending it didn't matter. I didn't need to read it twice. I sat back slowly, phone still in hand, watching the message blink in that soft, passive way that made it feel harmless, but it wasn't. It was strategic. Buried in all the "we miss you" and family is family noise was the real message. We still expect you to be useful, not loved, not seen, just used. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then I turned the phone over, letting the silence in the kitchen settle again. The glass of water in front of me had gone warm. I didn't drink it. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet, pulled down a worn metal box. I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the things that didn't belong in any filing cabinet. Hospital bills in my name. I never remembered approving a torn envelope with my signature forged in a pen I never owned. And an old credit report from college, the one that told me I had defaulted on a loan I never took out. That was the moment I couldn't unsee, the moment I found out that my mother, so polished, so poised, had taken out a Parent Plus loan under my name without asking, not out of desperation, but because it was easier. Easier to use my identity than have a hard conversation, easier to lie than to explain why Melissa needed the funds more urgently, my name, my credit, my debt. They never told me I only found out when I applied for my first mortgage and the underwriter flagged it. I remembered calling my mom shaking with confusion, with shame. She hadn't even tried to deny it. "It's all the same family anyway," she had said. "You'll make more than enough to pay it off." I had, but that wasn't the point. I sat back down at the kitchen island, every part of me wired with a new kind of alertness. This wasn't about one night. It was never just about the party or the clock or the photos. It was years. Years of being erased, and when that didn't work, repurposed. Years of being told I was too sensitive, too cold, too ambitious, too distant, while they quietly funneled their failures into my account, their shame into my silence. I picked up my phone again, not to reply, to start compiling. I opened a new folder on my desktop, Echo Inside. I dropped copies of the forged loan documents, the old texts from Callista, asking for help with her medical bills, the years of quiet transfers I made into my parents' account. Whenever they said the furnace broke or the roof leaked, always me, always quiet. No more. I drafted a single text, just 1 cent only to my mother. "You once told me it was all the same family anyway." "You were wrong. I know where the lines are now." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. I powered down the phone, powered up my resolve, and sat in that dim kitchen for a moment longer, breathing deeper than I had in months. Across town, maybe they were still spinning, still whispering, still trying to plug the holes in their narrative. But that wasn't my business anymore. They had spent years trying to shrink me into someone who could be forgotten, and now they'd remember. Not because I yelled, not because I begged, but because I walked away carrying the one thing they could never reclaim once it was gone, my silence. And this time it wasn't a gift. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me, the utility of me, the tool I could be if only I played along. I stared at the glass of water in my hand, like it might clarify something. But all it did was reflect the overhead light warped faint. I let out a dry laugh, short, humorless. Even the cracks in my ceiling told the truth better than my family ever did. The urge to text back flared hot and fast, but it fizzled just as quickly. They weren't worth the burn. They weren't worth an explanation or a second round of betrayal. Because, let's be honest, this wasn't the first time. I rose slowly and poured the water down the sink. The silence in my kitchen suddenly too loud, too present. As I wiped my hands on a dish towel, something shifted in me. Subtle, final. The part of me that used to reach for them, beg for them to see me, had grown quiet. Not dead. Just done. Click. I blocked Mom, then Dad, then Callista. Click, click. There was something satisfying in the simplicity of it, like closing a book you were never allowed to finish. And yet, as I stood there in the dim light, an older ache stirred one I hadn't touched in years. It surfaced without warning, jagged and unwelcome. Liam. The name hit me in the ribs like a slow punch, my first real love. The only one who ever knew me before the accolades and job titles we dated all through grad school. He was kind, steady. The type who remembered small things like how I hated cilantro or that I couldn't fall asleep without white noise. We were supposed to move in together after graduation. We'd even picked out an apartment near Pike Street Market until he ghosted me. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. I'd spent weeks thinking it was something I'd done, some subtle shift. I hadn't noticed some failure to say the right thing. But years later, when I bumped into his cousin at a conference, the truth slipped out between drinks and nostalgia. He said your dad told him you were getting back with your ex, that you needed space, wanted him to back off. My heart had frozen mid-sip. "And your sister told him you weren't serious about him anyway," the cousin added. "Said you had a history of using people to climb." I hadn't known what to say. I still didn't. It made too much sense. It sounded exactly like them, the way they warped the truth to suit the version of me that made them feel in control. They had taken him from me not by force, but by fiction, and I had swallowed the grief as if it were my fault. Until now. Now I wasn't just grieving, I was remembering reframing. The knock at the door came just as the rain started again, light and steady. Not loud, just 2 gentle taps. When I opened it, no one stood on the porch. Just a cream-colored envelope lying on the doormat. My name scrawled across it in rushed handwriting I knew too well. Mom's. I stared at it for a full minute before bending down to pick it up. It was warm from the porch light. Inside a single note. We know texting wasn't enough. Can we meet face to face just to talk? Love, Mom. Love! Once that word meant something. Now it felt like bait, like a hook wrapped in silk. Still, I said yes. Not for closure, not for hope, but because sometimes you have to look the wound dead in the eye to know you're done, stitching yourself back to it. We met 2 days later at a small cafe near Union Square. I chose it. No memories there, no echoes, just neutral ground. The smell of burnt espresso hung in the air as I stepped inside. My heels echoed on the old tile floor. They were already there. Mom, Dad, Callista crammed together in a booth meant for 2, pretending to look relaxed. I walked slowly to the table. They half stood unsure if they should reach out or pretend we were strangers. I slipped into the seat across from them without a word. The first 5 minutes were nothing but polite weather comments and small talk, the kind of people use when pretending the room isn't burning down. Then Mom leaned in, voice syrupy, "Sweetheart, we just want to move past all the misunderstandings." Dad nodded like a politician. Family's too important to let little things divide us. Callista jumped in too quickly. You know how people gossip. Celine, they twist everything. I said nothing. But something inside me clicked into place a clean final note. I wasn't here for an apology. I was here for proof. You know how people gossip. They twist things, Callista offered with a rehearsed shrug. I let them talk, let them pile excuse upon excuse, like children stacking rotting wood and calling it shelter. Then quietly I cut through it all. If you're truly sorry, I said, voice steady, you'll say it publicly. In front of everyone who heard your lies. The table stiffened. My mother blinked rapidly, her tight smile cracking at the edges like worn porcelain. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at his watch. Suddenly overwhelmed with invented obligations, Callista fidgeted the leather strap of her purse twisting beneath her fingers. "Celine, honey." Mom began, her tone slipping into its usual condescension. "There's no need to make a scene. What's done is done." "No," I said softly, "it's not." Dad leaned in, lowering his voice like we were conspiring, not confronting. Dragging things back up only creates more division. People move on so quickly. Callista added, her voice too bright. No one even remember. But I remembered everything. I stared at them. The people who had erased me from their family narrative and rewritten it to suit their comfort. And in that still moment, I realized what I had needed all along. Not an apology, not even closure. Just the truth. And a life where I no longer twisted myself to be tolerated. They're not sorry for what they did. I said to myself, more than them. They're sorry they don't have control anymore. Their version of healing required my silence. Their peace came only when I disappeared. I stood slowly. The world narrowed to the feel of my own heartbeat, solid and certain in my chest. "I'm done crossing lines to stay in rooms that never wanted me," I said, calm, clear, final. Heads turned from nearby tables. I didn't care. The expression staring back at me twisted into something between shame and disbelief. But I didn't wait to see how they spun this moment to suit themselves. I walked out. The door shut behind me with a soft click. No slammed exits, no raised voices. Just silence, the kind that settles not with defeat, but with decision. Outside, twilight had wrapped Tacoma in a quiet blue hush. I should have felt cold. Instead, every step away from that booth made my bones feel a little lighter. This time I didn't drive home. I drove to my office. The building stood still in the night, its brick face calm under the pale glow of security lights. Everyone else had gone home, but I wasn't there for work. I was there for the truth. Inside, I turned on the small desk lamp. The soft pool of light landed on a stack of papers I'd kept filed away for far too long. Receipts, transfers, account statements, tangible proof of all the ways I had been their silent safety net. Mortgage payments for their second home. Canceled the emergency fund I'd quietly padded for Callista after every one of her impulsive decisions gone. The insurance top-ups for my father's golf-related injuries revoked. Every tether between us had once been a thread I wrapped around my own throat. One by one, I snipped them. No confrontations, no explanations, just clean cuts. And then I opened a locked folder on my desktop, one I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were saved screenshots, text messages, emails, and one heart-wrenching chain between my ex Daniel and me, or what I thought was me. I opened the file labeled "Forwarded by mistake, from Mom to Daniel." The words hit like glass. Celine's going through a lot right now. She's not stable. I just thought you should know before things get too serious. There it was, the quiet sabotage, the lie that shattered the only relationship that had ever made me feel seen. Daniel had left without explanation. I'd spent years thinking it was me, that I'd been too much, too complicated, too invisible. But it had been them again. They hadn't just hurt me. They had undermined the few places where I was safe, quietly dismantling anything that threatened their control. I closed the file, my throat tight but dry. No tears this time, just clarity. I stood and shut down the computer. The rain had picked up again outside, tapping softly against the office window. I looked out over the empty parking lot. The silence that wrapped around me now wasn't loneliness. It was liberation. By the time I reached for my coat and turned off the lights, the only thing I carried with me was the truth. And for the first time in a long time, it was more than enough. It started with a coworker sliding into my messages with a simple, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook post from an old family friend. A photo of my parents smiling in front of a church fundraiser banner, captioned with a passive-aggressive gem. So proud of families who give everything and ask for nothing, even when some children forget who helped them rise. Not even subtle. Minutes later, a text from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "Heard you left your parents high and dry, harsh Celine." Then another. My high school math teacher of all people is posting publicly about kids who think success makes them too good for gratitude. Thinly veiled, but obvious to anyone who knew me or the timing. It was almost impressive how fast they pivoted, how efficiently they turned my silence into a new weapon against me. As if not playing their game made me the villain, they always warned others I was. For a moment it stung. That familiar heat behind the eyes, the tightening in my chest, the same aching pull I used to feel when I was younger, wondering what I had done to deserve being the family scapegoat. But this time it didn't last. That night, after another 10-hour stretch of back-to-back meetings, I sat on my apartment balcony, the cold metal chair grounding me. My phone buzzed again. Another cousin's birthday photo, another bitter comment tagged under my name. I stared at it. Then I set the phone down, not with fury, not with tears, with peace. They could keep twisting the narrative. They could shout into their carefully curated echo chambers until their voices cracked. But I wouldn't be there to hear it. I wasn't living in their story anymore. I wasn't tethered to the version of me they needed to feel like heroes. I smiled. Not the small apologetic smile I used to wear after every family slight, but something else. Something steadier, real. Let them lie. Let them cast shadows. I had light now, and I wasn't stepping out of it just to meet them in the dark. The sun had barely started peeking through my blinds when I stood at the window the next morning, coffee in hand. Another day, another choice, another chance to move forward. I had thought cutting the financial cords would be the end of it, but I should have known better. People who thrive on control don't just release it, they retaliate. The Pacific TerraTech Leadership Conference was just 2 weeks away, and my days were packed with speaker coordination, contract reviews, and strategy rollouts. It should have been thrilling, invigorating. Instead, it was shadowed. Because one morning, an anonymous email slid into my inbox subject line, "You should see this." No greeting, no sender, just a string of attachments. At first I thought it was junk, until I saw the language familiar, too familiar. False accusations, alleged ethics violations, screenshots of fabricated emails suggesting I had used my executive role to retaliate against employees, claims of favoritism, unfair promotions, all wrapped in a language that dripped concern and righteousness. But I knew those patterns. The way a sentence shifted blame behind a smile, the subtle framing of loyalty as manipulation. It was my father's cold precision. It was Callista's sugary sabotage. And I knew why they were doing it. They couldn't touch me emotionally anymore, so they came for the one thing they thought I would never risk my reputation. They didn't realize that they weren't dealing with the version of me who once begged to be seen. They were dealing with the woman who had nothing left to lose because she'd already taken back everything that mattered. I didn't react. I responded. 2 evenings. That's all it took. Bank statements, wire transfers. Every payment that had propped them up for years. Screenshots of late-night texts from Callista asking for help, money favors, then pretending they never happened. Mortgage documents, insurance forms. Every thread they thought I'd let fall, I organized them into folders, labeled dated, cross-referenced. Then I scheduled a private meeting with Pacific TerraTech's corporate counsel. No fanfare, no theatrics, just facts. Facts that wouldn't just neutralize their attack. They would expose every inch of their hypocrisy. Because when you've been betrayed for years by the people who claim to love you, there comes a moment when the truth isn't just power, it's freedom. And I was finally ready to use it. The Pacific TerraTech Leadership Conference arrived like thunder, loud, sharp, unstoppable. The grand conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Rows upon rows of investors, partners, stakeholders pressed every chair, filled every eye, waiting for the future of a company I had helped build. Brick by invisible brick, I stood backstage, tucked behind the curtain, heels planted, firm breath even. I wasn't on the list of speakers that morning. And that was perfect, because I'd already said what I needed to without saying a word. Halfway through the opening keynote, I caught the shift. Members of the board flipping through confidential reports. Eyes narrowing over highlighted lines, legal counsel slipping from one row to another, passing notes, motioning for hushed sidebar conversations. Whispers this time didn't sting. They clarified. By noon, the tension had cracked the room wide open. 3 hours after the first subtle signal, the board released an official statement. It reaffirmed my leadership role, acknowledged recent unauthorized attempts to undermine executive integrity, and called for immediate internal realignment. No names, no dramatics. But the message rang out clearly. We know. We see, we do not condone. The smear campaign, quiet slick, venomous had been traced back and exposed emails, IP logs, a digital breadcrumb trail leading straight to the very people who once called themselves my family. It was over faster than it began. I didn't gloat, didn't wait for applause. I didn't need a mic drop moment because the truth had landed with weight enough to split marble. That night, beneath the brittle shine of the Seattle skyline, I walked out of that building. Not as someone who survived her family's betrayal, but as someone entirely unbound by it. Not angry, not vindictive. Free, not because they apologized. They hadn't. Not because they admitted they were wrong. They never would. But because I finally understood some truths, don't need your defense. They stand on their own, stronger than any denial. And sometimes silence is the sharpest justice. Later, I found myself sitting at the edge of Green Lake, the breeze off the water laced with spring. The golden hour had begun to soften the edges of the world. I rested my hands in my lap, watching the sunlight dance across the ripples like shattered glass. It felt like the right place for a kind of funeral. Not for them. For the version of me who used to believe that love was something you had to earn. My phone buzzed on the bench beside me. Another text rattling against the wood, then a voicemail. Another, "We miss you this time," layered with concern, so saccharine it made my teeth hurt. I didn't reach for it. I closed my eyes instead, tilting my head back as the leaves whispered above me. The world kept moving, kind, indifferent, honest in a way people rarely are. It had been nearly a month since the truth exploded inside Pacific TerraTech. Since then, the calls had started soft at first, then increasingly desperate. We were wrong. Let's rebuild. We're still family. Slogans. Recycled promises. I had once inhaled like oxygen, but now they sounded like echoes from a house I no longer lived in. I reached into my purse and pulled out the birthday card I had written for them years ago, the one I never sent. The corners were bent edges frayed from being opened and folded too many times. I smoothed it across my knee. The handwriting was mine, but the girl behind it felt like a ghost. Dear Mom and Dad, it read, I love you. I hope you know that no matter what happens, I'll always be proud to be your daughter. I smiled, a small, sad smile. There was a time I would have given anything to hear those words reflected back to me. Now I didn't need them to. The pain was still there. Not gone, but softened, like scar tissue. A part of me, but not the part that defined me. I folded the card slowly, gently. Not with anger, not with grief, just finality. I placed it on the bench beside me. The sun dipped lower behind the trees. In the distance, a child laughed a kite, caught wind in the soft chatter of families, mingled with the rustling of grass. I stood up and left the card behind. A breeze swept through the park and caught it, lifted it off the bench, tossing it gently into the air before letting it fall into the brush. I didn't turn around to watch it land. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't check it. Each step I took was a quiet vow I would no longer build bridges out of broken bloodlines. I would no longer make homes in hearts that only knew how to lock doors. I was done waiting to be loved the right way. And for the first time, I wasn't hoping for a response. I was already home. I would not apologize for the space I needed to heal. No more waiting. No more holding my breath for the kind of love that had conditions wrapped in expectations and silence. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who poured from an empty cup, smiled through wounds, and stayed quiet to keep their world intact. But she was gone. What remained was someone they hadn't prepared for, someone whole, someone who had nothing left to prove. I didn't walk away to punish them. I walked away because I finally understood love without respect isn't love at all, and silence, once a cage, had become my clearest voice. At the edge of the lake path where the gravel gave way to open road, I paused. The horizon stretched wide, unpromised, but unthreatened. I smiled. A real one. Healing didn't come in thunder. It came in this stillness, in choosing yourself, especially when no one else thinks you should. As I crossed the road, I saw the old birthday card, catching one last breeze before resting in the grass. The goodbye they never saw coming. The one I owed myself all along. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. In the end, Celine didn't have to bang on the door to be seen. She didn't have to scream to be heard. She just stood up, walked away quietly, and left behind a world that had once disregarded her worth. She didn't seek revenge. She chose the truth. She chose herself. And perhaps in that journey, the most powerful thing was not what she took back, but what she decided to let go of. If you've ever felt erased from your own family, hoping they would change, but in the end only to be left in silence and hurt, I hope this story has touched you. Have you ever had to choose to leave to protect your inner peace? Share your story in the comments. I always read every confession you send. Comment 9 if you're also learning to choose yourself, even if it's just a small step. And don't forget to like to support the healing stories and subscribe to not miss the next journey from Eagle of Revenge. Thank you for being here.